It was 1985. And a Lockheed L-1011 en route from northern Italy to Treja, Slovenia, crashes into the Julian Alps, 9,000 feet up. Now, if anyone told you about the Julian Alps, they would tell you that the cliffs are horrendously steep. The peaks are enormously high. And there's not very many places that are flat at all, if you could even call it flat. But the L-1011 hit one of those flat areas. But the plane was completely disintegrated except for one section, the tail section. It came down and slid across the ice on this little flat area and came to a chaotic halt. And only 2 out of 250 people survived. A woman, Sarah, 40, and her son, Nikolai, 18. After the snow stopped piling in and the dust settled a bit, Sarah came to. Delusional, but she came to. But the first thing on her mind was her son. Nikolai, she screamed. Nothing. And then, from behind her and up a little bit, she heard a murmur. I'm okay, Mom. But I think I broke my leg. In a low, humming voice. So Sarah turned around. She felt his leg, and sure enough, he broke his tibia. So she got down on her knees, and she found a couple of bars and some tattered cloth, some rope, and she tied up his leg to make a makeshift swing. And then she turned around and fell. And then Nikolai, looking out through the gaping hole in front of them, which was the remainder of the aircraft, and could muster up all the enthusiasm he had. He said, Mom, I know where we are. You see, Sarah and Nikolai were going to the Julian Alps for a tour. They were meeting their guide, Miles Davis, who taught them how to mountaineer back in California, in Boulder, Colorado, actually, the foothills of the Rockies. So they were survivalists. And he looked out and said, Mom, here's what I need you to do. We can't leave now. A storm's coming in. It's getting dark. But in the morning, I want you to get up. At your feet's a rope. I want you to tie it around your waist. And I want you to walk out of the plane and turn to the east and walk off the mountain. But tonight, we need to rest. And so they found whatever they could. And they wrapped themselves up. And they tucked themselves under seats and cloths. And they went to sleep. In the morning, Sarah woke up to a foot of new snow. And she stepped out. But before she did, she remembered what Nicholas said. She picked up the rope. She ties it around her waist, nice and tight. She steps out of the aircraft. And she turns to the east and she feels the sun on her face. You see, Sarah's blind. She lost her sight when she was 14 due to a childhood disease. And so she grabs the rope, she gives it a little pull, and she feels Nicola behind her. She walks out into the snow, she turns to the east, and she walks, and she walks, and she walks. And then all of a sudden, after hours of walking, and her throbbing head is obviously a severe concussion, she feels a tug, and she stops. And she hears Nicholas say, Mom, there's a cliff in front of you. You need to turn to your right, walk 100 yards down a slight decline, and then back to the east. And she said, no, I can't. Mom, have faith. You can do this. So she turns and she walks through these thickets and she's pushing and she's pulling. She pulls the rope and she turns and she walks down the slight decline. And sure enough, there's a small path, and she turns to the east and she starts walking again. And she walks and she walks. And every once in a while, Nikolai would say, "Mom, there's water, or there's some berries, just something to keep her going." And then, when the sun was going down, she could feel the cold. She tucked under, as she was taught, a makeshift lean-to made out of rocks, and she pulls the snow up against them, and they sleep. And the next morning she wakes up and her head is still throbbing. It's the third day and it's still pain, but she gets up and she walks again, and she's still heading east and she's walking. And all of a sudden she comes up, she hears the stream, a raging river, and a tug on a rope. And she goes, "I can't do this." And Nicholas says, "Mom, you can make it across. Have faith." And so she steps out into the water and she starts walking across, the water pushing her ever so much down the stream. And all of a sudden, she slips. Under the water she goes, and all of a sudden a pull from the rope. Her head pops up out of the water, and she hears Nicholas say, "Mom, you can stand." And so she stands up, and she finishes walking across the river, 20 yards, to the other shore. She gets up onto the shore, and she gives a little tug, and she walks. And on the grounds of thickets, and there's bushes, but she keeps on persevering, moving forward. The quintessential point was to get across, to get help. And she walks. And at the end of the day, again, exhausted, she comes up on a cabin. She feels the door. She pushes it open. She walks about 10 feet into the cabin, falls onto the ground, completely exhausted. The door slams behind her. The next thing she hears is the door opening up, hits the wall, and she hears the familiar voice of Miles Davis, her mountaineering partner, the guy she was going to meet. And at that moment she cries. The tears are pouring out of her eyes. And Miles says, "Sarah, you okay?" She says, "I'm fine. Take care of Nicola. He has a broken leg." And it gets quiet. And then Miles says, "Sarah, Nicola's not here." "Well, he has to be here," she says. "Check outside." And then there's silence. Deafening silence. And Miles says, "Sarah, when I heard the plane crash, I got with the Slovenian Mounties and I came up to try to find you. We saw your feet print leaving the plane, and we followed it to a cliff that was almost 100 feet down, and my heart sank. And then we saw to the right a bush, and on the bush there was a small piece of something. It was a piece of a cushion, a piece of an aircraft cushion. And we pushed through the bushes, and there were your tracks, going slightly downhill, and we followed them. And then we came up upon a river, a raging river, and we thought we lost you for good in the river. And then in the middle of the river, on a stick protruding out, was another piece of a cushion. And so we walked across the river and came up on the field. And in this field with thickets, there were little pieces of cushion on all these bushes, and we thought you were leaving us breadcrumbs. And we came up upon the cabin, and here you are." "No, that's impossible," she said, crying on the floor. "Where is Nicola?" And Miles said, "He never made it out of the plane, Sarah. He probably died an hour or two after impact, with a splint on his leg." "No, that can't be," she said. "He helped me get here. He was behind me. He told me where to make turns, where to get food." The tears rolling from her eyes. She was whisked away to northern Italy, where she was treated with a concussion. If you ask Miles what happened, He would tell you that it was sheer determination, perseverance, mountaineering skills, and a lot of luck that guided Sarah out of that mountain from 9,000 feet over the next few days. But if you ask Sarah, she'll tell you, what guided me was blind faith in my son, Nikolai. Mr. Toastmaster.